Jon, what's going on, man? Welcome to Dad Edge.
Larry, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure. I'm excited for the show and for the subject matter.
I'm excited to have you on, man. Very, very excited. And hey, this is episode 300, and you're
crazy.
It's crazy.
Congratulations!
Right? Oh, thank you.
Wow.
It's been.
Did you ever think you would get to 300 episodes of a podcast?
Yeah. You want to actually hear something really funny? When I decided, it was April of 2015 that I launched the podcast, and I had outlines for 10 shows, and I was like, all right, well, we got 10 shows. After that, I'm on God's good humor. And, here we are at, we have over 600 now actually total, but on the Monday show, which
that's
was
wild, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. So,
wow.
God's got a sense of humor.
Indeed.
Hey, let's just kind of start with some fun questions first.
Sure, man.
We'll get into your background and all that good stuff, but what is something that you love to spend time doing outside of work? Something that brings you joy and fun and maybe even laughter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would be kind of trite if I came on the Dad Edge Alliance and I was like, oh, spending time with my family, which that's true. Absolutely. I love spending time with my family. But I recently moved to Colorado Springs, which we were discussing before you hit the record button. It's a beautiful area out here. It's the first time I've gotten an opportunity to choose the area that I wanted to live. And just getting outdoors, man, whether there's snow out, whether it's sunny and warm, getting outdoors and hiking, biking, playing around in the hills, doing some very rudimentary rock climbing. I'm not going to say that I'm a mountain climber of any sort, but just getting out and doing some bouldering, that kind of thing. I think spending time outdoors to me is what really helps me enjoy life day to day. So that's probably it, man.
Nice, man. I like, and hey, you were in one heck of a beautiful area to be doing that stuff. Yeah. Have you done a 14er yet? I know you've been in Colorado a short time, but have you done a 14er yet?
Just driving to the top of Pikes Peak. No. I have, but not since I've lived here. I'm forgetting the name of the peak that I climbed. I was married before. My ex-wife lived in Longmont, and we went out to one of the 14ers that was close to there, and we climbed it. But no, I have not done one since living out here this go round. But I definitely plan on hitting several of them. They're a ton of fun and a heck of a workout. So
yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we so what we do in Dad Edge is we always get we do a weekend retreat usually to Colorado. Nice. We'll do the Springs, or we'll do Breck, or we'll do something like that. And what we do is we do a weekend basically of masterminding, but we always do a 14er. We've done Bierstadt, we've done Quandary. This year, I'm not really sure. Or next year, what we're doing, or this year actually, as we record this show, I'm not sure which 14er we're going to be doing. But we'll have to keep you updated if you want to join us.
Yeah,
it's always a good time,
man. Keep me in the loop on that.
I will. All right. So another question for you: what is something that you most enjoy doing with your wife? Spending quality time with her. I
don't know if all that's for this show, but yeah.
This is Dad Edge, man. Okay, like we can live on the edge a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously enjoy those extracurricular activities, but yeah, my wife. Oh man, she is the light of my life. She is just incredible. She's when guys come over to the house and we go into the garage, we open the garage and they see all these tools. They're like, oh, cool, man, you're into woodworking? I'm like, no, man, those are my wife's planers. That's my wife's miter saw. That's my wife's everything. Like, she's got all these tools, and she's super, like, she knows how to use them. Like, she built the deck on our old house.
What?
She's she built our crib that we have for our two kids. That's going to become like a family heirloom.
Oh my gosh.
So really, I guess I'm not answering your question by telling you that, but I enjoy seeing the work that she does. She's just incredible, incredibly handy, and I'm in awe of her always. So I think that's one of the things that I enjoy doing. And then the two of us just enjoy getting out again, like talked about before. I mean, you talked about Breck and some of these other great locations here in Colorado. We went up Telluride a few weeks ago and did some of the downhill mountain biking. And that is just hella fun, man. So I think now that we're out in Colorado, mountain biking and road biking is going to become something that we do regularly together.
So cool, man. So cool. And hey, I feel you. I see you. I've known my wife for 24 years. We've been married for 17 years. And my father-in-law, super handy dude. He's a mechanic, but it can fix anything. He's got a whole arsenal of tools. My wife has two younger brothers. One's a carpenter. The other one's an electrician. And my wife is actually very handy. I grew up in a fatherless home. Now, that is not an excuse for the fact that I am not handy. I'm just not. I'm not handy. Yeah. And to be honest, like full ownership here, I've never taken the time to go educate myself. Like my kids, my boys were like, hey, how do we do a backsplash? I'm like, that's a great question. Let's go to Lowe's and take one of those classes. So we did. I'm like, I don't know. Let's YouTube it, right? We figure it out. But my father-in-law, like he likes to bust my chops. Like he's a good dude, and he's young too. He had my wife when he was 19. Him and my mother-in-law were very young.
Wow.
So he's a good dude. And for Christmas, and no kidding around, he always gets my wife the next new tool because my wife is handy. Like she's super handy. And my boys are old enough now. My two oldest ones, they're like, hey, Dad, this is broken. Never mind. I'll go get Mom. You know.
Yeah, dude. I'm not to that age with my kids yet. But funny enough, yesterday I burned a piece of toast. That's how pathetic I can be sometimes. But I burned a piece of toast, getting it ready for my kids, my little girl's breakfast. And she looked at me and she's like, Dada, why can't you make stuff? I'm like, oh man, I'm sure that won't be the first time she says that, but yeah, I'm not handy as far as making things. I do the electric stuff at the house, or, I can plug a DVD player in, if that's even a thing still, Blu-ray. but when it comes to building something, that's not me, man.
Well, you can get through Hell Week. Okay, so
I can do that. I can build teams.
Right, you build teams. You can get through Hell Week and buds. You can go on missions, accomplish missions. Yeah. As my mother-in-law says, she pats me on the back usually when my wife opens like the new wrench. She's like, Larry, everybody has their skills and gifts. Okay, yours is just different.
Yep.
All right, final question before we get started here in the show. Is there a quote that really resonates with you, something very meaningful to you that you like to live your life by?
Yeah, and it's also gonna sound trite, but at the Naval Academy, that's where I went to school. There's a quote in Latin above the chapel doors. It says "Non sibi, sit patriae," and that means not for self but for country. And I honestly think that is a quote that has driven a lot of what I have done in my life, and not just in my military career, but in things that I've done with my family. I think that things that we do as a family, even though my kids are young, we try to think about how those things will ultimately affect them and what they can do for others in their country, their countrymen, their fellow countrymen, which I think is hugely important in this day and age. I mean, I think the country is at a point where it's almost at odds with one another all the time. And not to get into a deep political conversation, but I think there's a lot of healing that can happen. And if we focus on the fact that we are, that we have a lot more in common than we do different, then we could serve one another better. So yeah, I think that's the quote one of the quotes that I try to live by most often in my life.
I love that, man. Just to acknowledge that's a very selfless quote to live by, right? It's not about you, it's about others. So
right. Yeah, I think that's huge.
That. Yeah. Tell us about your childhood and in particular your own father. What was it like for you growing up with him?
Yeah. Oh man, I had a blessed childhood, honestly. Had an amazing father and mother. They're still married together and together. they are still together, rather. Let me get my words straight. Anyway, they were 76 and 77. And they get out on their bikes every day, and they just set an amazing example still to this day. But I'll backtrack. So I've got 3 older sisters and a younger brother. My mother and father were born and raised in South Africa, and they go back several generations there. And then all the kids, so my 3 older sisters and myself and my younger brother, we were born in South Africa as well. And my father saw that the country was going downhill. He didn't support apartheid, thankfully. And he also saw that the country at the time, I'm not sure if this is still the case, but at the time, a young man, if he was healthy when he graduated high school, had to basically get drafted. Conscription still existed. And so they brought the family over here to the States, originally on just a 1-year working visa. And they were like, hey, we'll see what happens. And the rest is history. So we ended up staying here. As far as that conscription thing, the joke is that I always tell my dad, I'm like, well, you got me and my brother out of the country, so we wouldn't be forced to enter the South African military. So I came over here and voluntarily joined the U.S. military. So funny joke between us, and a little bit ironic. But our childhood, we were certainly not rich. We weren't poor. We were comfortable. My father was an architect, ended up coming over here to the States to teach architecture at Louisiana Tech University in a small town called Ruston, Louisiana. And my mother was a nurse, and we were going through school, all of us regular kids. I ended up being a track and cross country runner, which was what my dad did. And that was really when our relationship bloomed, if you will. I mean, we'd been a solid and healthy husband and father, father and son. How about that? Yeah, father and son. And we've been healthy. But then when he saw that I was starting to get into track and cross country, there was another thing that we could bond over. And he shared like all his training journals that he had when he was a younger man, and some of the workouts that he had done, he had shared with my coach, and he and my coach bonded. And I think I still look today at my coach, my cross country and track coach, as like a second father. But it was also the relationship that he had with my father that helped to kind of secure that. But then, after graduating high school, went into the Navy. Initially, my father pushed back on that. He was like, hey, you can do something more with your life. I just don't think he fully understood what it was that serving your country meant to me. Nor did he understand what serving in the military actually meant. Since then, he's gotten to understand both what it meant to me and what serving meant, just in general. And he and I have had a great relationship. As a matter of fact, about 3 years ago, so right around my 40th birthday or so, we did a cross-country drive together, and like I went into full military officer mode, like outlined literally every stop that we were going to do to the minute so that we could maximize the experience. Because my father, he has seen parts of the country as he's flown, from one point to another, but he hasn't ever driven across the country. And there's just so much of this country that you can see when you get on the road. And so we stopped all over the place. So we went to Arches, we went to St. Louis, we stopped at little random diners that I'd found on Yelp, and we found random bike rides to do together. And again, he's in his 70s, and we just had a blast together. But it was also super emotional to connect, because I hadn't spent that much time with my father probably since I was in high school. And we talked about all sorts of things, like opened up the onion, peeled back the onion on things that had bothered us in our relationship, things that had bothered us just in life in general. So I probably went on all sorts of tangents there, man, but hopefully that answered your question. I think I had a pretty good childhood, and my relationship with my father is pretty strong.
I love that story. I love that story because you embraced an adventure with your father. And I love the fact that you planned it all out, because probably what that did was is gave you mental bandwidth to just relax and enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
You knew what was going to come next versus like, where are we going to go? I don't know. Where are you going to go? Right. So you're able to actually, right. You're able to actually focus on the task at hand, which makes me really realize that the next time I go on a trip, we should go together, because you should plan it. Because I'm a terrible planner.
Yeah, there's some fun to it. There's, I also like going on trips where nothing's planned, to have some flexibility and just kind of play it by ear. But yeah, if you're going to have an adventurous trip, then I like having it planned just so you can maximize the time. Normally after those trips, I need a vacation from my vacation. But yeah, it was worth it for sure.
I hear you, man. You've got 2 kids. I've got 4, and they're 4 boys. And I always say, like, oof, a vacation is not a vacation. It's a trip.
Yeah.
Because mom and dad are working.
Yeah,
but
totally.
let's steal from your dad for a minute. Okay. You mentioned over and over that you had a good childhood, and it really became obvious that you had a good connection with this man. And even more so, your connection even strengthened on this trip. But reflecting on your childhood and what it was like growing up for you with that man under that roof, what were 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 things that you're like, you know what? This is what made that experience with him and growing up in that house so impactful. Because I like asking these questions, because we like to steal from the good, because, hey, if we can replicate in our own lives what your dad did, that's a plus for us.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is growing up, there were things that he did that I was like, you know what, when I'm older, I'm not going to do that. And now that I am older, I find myself doing it and being intentional about doing it. Like I said, we weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Well, it was because he had this saying, it's not an original saying, but it's like every penny counts. So like he budgeted, and like he would sit down on Sundays and go through all the bills that needed to be paid. And he would keep a balanced checkbook, and I would watch him do that. And I was like, you know what? One day I'm going to make so much money, I'm not going to have to do that. And I'm going to spoil my kids rotten and all this. And here I am now, 43 years old, got 2 little ones. And I'm the one saying, hey, every penny counts. If we go to the grocery store and they see toys that are, you go to a grocery store to get food, but there's still toys, because grocery store people are smart, and they know kids are going to go there, so they have toys everywhere. And the kids are like, hey, I want that toy. I'm like, no, you have enough toys at home. We're perfectly comfortable. You don't need that. And that's a lesson. Granted, my kids are young, 3 and 1, but eventually that lesson will trickle down and they'll remember it. And it's a lesson that's important in life. Not just in managing your own finances, but in managing your stress, right? And if you're stretched out financially to the point where you can't afford what it is you're buying, that wears you out as a father, as a husband. It wrecks relationships. So I think those were things that's one of the things my father didn't directly and actively teach me, but I passively learned from watching him. And then just in how he treats my mom, he respects her like she's gold, right? Just she's his everything. And I think
how did he do that?
Well, just kind, always asking her for her opinion. Like they were a partnership. It wasn't he was the head of the household. He was a part of the head. That head being the husband and wife, the mother and father. And I think that is something that's huge in my relationship with my wife now, and that I'm not the head of the household. Sure, I'm the man, but I'm not the head of the household. Then the 2 of us make up that head, and we make decisions together on what it is we want to do with the kids, how we're going to raise the kids, where it is we want to live. Everything requires both of our decisions. And I think that is critical to having a healthy relationship. And he taught me that by doing it. Again, he didn't sit me down and say, hey, you need to respect women and need to treat them this way. He just did that. And I emulate his actions. I learned from watching him. So probably not what you're looking for. But yeah, those are what I learned from my father. I'm sure I learned tons more, but what's jumping out at me right now, that's those two things.
Oh no, man, just the opposite actually. So I always, ever since inception of this show, I remember in the very, very beginning, I was like, what are we going to talk about on this show? Like, what are the themes that are going to pop up? Right. And what I've noticed in everything that we do, and we've been doing this for a long time now, is what we call the 5 dimensions of being a husband, father, and man. Managing your personal and family finances is one. Optimizing your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. Creating a legendary marriage. Epic connection with your kids, and being a leader. Those are the 5 elements.
Oh man, I love that.
Thank you. And if you think awesome. About those 5 elements, right? Those are the ones that we have the least amount of training on. And the cool thing about what you just said is you learned not by what your father said out of his mouth through his words, but through his actions. You're like, wow, he's very aware of the finances and the budgeting, and he's careful with his money, and he's methodical, and he's strategic, and he watches things very closely. And then how he treats your mom, and how he always asked for her input, and he respected her, and he sounds like he cherished her. And you got to watch all that, which is great. So out of those 5 dimensions, you got to learn too. We do something very similar here. And what I've noticed is a lot of men, those 5 dimensions, they haven't really learned a whole lot growing up. They've learned now that we're older, but so for instance, with finances, it's no secret that most of society out there is a financial wreck. And it's because, we grew up in households where finances either weren't talked about, or there was an overwhelming looming stress about finances. There was maybe, there was a standpoint, a mindset of scarcity. And here in my house, we talk about finances very, very openly. And kids know exactly how much money we make. They know how much money we save. They know how much our house payment is. They know everything, right?
Wow.
And we do that on purpose. We do that intentionally because we want to get those conversations started now. And it sounds like your dad was great at leading the charge of like, I'm not only going to maybe say a few things out loud, but I'm going to also be the walking, talking example of how you can operate and do these things well, right? And maybe he was aware of it, and maybe he totally wasn't. Maybe that was just part of who he was.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I absolutely. I think I love my dad, but I don't think he was planning to share those actively through a passive mechanism, but his just setting the example was enough for me. And he's still, like I said, to this day, my wife and I, we went, when I retired from the Navy, just this summer, we drove across the country in an RV, and we spent several months living in the RV actually, but we visited my parents in Ruston. They still live there after, 35, 36 years, small town. He actually designed the house that they built in. So architect designed house. It's not something that, like, if you drive through the neighborhood, you're like, that house looks very different. Anyhow, so we visited the small town of Ruston, and my 70-something-year-old parents, I think 75 and 76 at the time, were like, hey, let's go for a bike ride. And my wife and I are, early 40s. We went on a road bike with my parents. And they're in incredible shape. They didn't kick our butts because we still had youth on our side, but they did amazing. And then 2, there were times like when my mother was riding up a hill, and my father would like put his hand on her back just to help her up the hill a little bit. And I was like, just seeing that, I was like, yep, he's still living that life, still living the good father, good husband life, in his mid 70s. And he's still, like you said, I think the word you used was perfect, cherishes her. And that's, that example has carried forward to now with me and my wife. I cherish my bride. I mean, she's my everything. And I think that's where you need to start. If you can understand that you're in a relationship and a relationship has 2 sides to it, then you can really develop a strong and incredible relationship, not just as a husband and wife, but as a father and as a mother team together to raise kids. And I think that's huge.
Without a doubt. A lot of people I talk to, so I'll share some statistics with you that are scary. No secret, the divorce rate's 50%, right? I think it might even be a little bit over. What a lot of people don't know is that the 50% of married couples that stay together, 1/3 of those couples actually identify themselves as thriving and excellent. 1/3.
Oh, wow.
And if you think about like the 100% of people that get married, that's even a smaller number, right? So, but the next 1/3 of married couples that stay together, they're like, it's all right. I mean, I don't want to split up. It's not really everything I wanted, but it'll work, I guess. And then the final 1/3, miserable, zero connection, but they stay together for two reasons: finances or kids. And if you think about that, and I'm not saying that divorce is the answer, but I'm also saying be very careful about why you stay together, because your kids see that. And if you think your kids are dumb and they don't see that the fact that you're not really connected, think again. They know.
Yeah.
I, like you, I didn't have the father figure growing up. My mom was constantly in and out of marriages. I didn't even have a relationship with my biological father until I was 30. But I did have this amazing grandfather. And just like your dad, my grandfather very publicly loved my grandmother and cherished her, always complimented her, always kissed her, always hugged her till the day he passed away at 73. He was very affectionate with her. And that's one thing that I really appreciate now. And in my own marriage, like my boys, like I always tell my boys, I was like, my goal is to gross you out at least once a day. I want to hear you say that's disgusting, right? That's gross. Like there was just the other night, my wife and I were cooking dinner and she went in the pantry to grab something, and I went in there too to grab something, and then she tried to get out and I pulled her back in and shut the door. And the kids were like, what are y'all doing in there?
Nice.
Like, I'm making out with mom. Give me a minute. So like, just things like that. And we laugh, and the kids are laughing. But it's like, you know what? It's like, man, take notes. All right. Take notes. And this is, one other final story. I took the boys actually to Colorado. I took them to a camping trip in Leadville at Twin Lakes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. That was like heaven. I've never seen anything more grandiose or beautiful in my life. And we were camping at 10,480 feet and direct shot of Mount Elbert. But before I left, my wife was saying goodbye to us, and she kind of came out to the driveway and she was waving, and I started to pull away, and I just looked at her, and I put the car in park, and my boys were like, what are you doing? And I was like, hold on. And I opened up the door, and my wife kind of looks at me, and I just walked up to her and I picked her up, like all the way up, and to where she was higher than me. And I kissed her and I just hugged her and just put her back down and walked away. And my boys were like, that was awesome.
See, I mean, they're taking notes, man. They're taking notes.
I mean, think about it. We have an opportunity to really, really change the game, like for these kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we get into you as a father and a husband, all that good stuff, I'm always so curious every time. And I say this is a blessing. This is a true blessing and honor and a privilege to be able to interview men like yourself, Navy SEALs like yourself. And by the way, thank you so much for your service. I don't mean that as cliche. I know that life is not easy.
I appreciate that. But, and what I typically say, and this may sound cliche as well, it was a unique honor and privilege to serve beside such amazing men and women, both on and off the battlefield.
Yeah.
And I look back on it, JFK, I won't try to quote him, but he has something to the effect of, if you ever look back in your life and you can say that I served in the United States Navy, you can say something like that with pride. Again, I'm totally paraphrasing that, but I feel that is something I will always look back on with pride. So that was a unique honor and privilege for sure.
Yeah. And I'm so curious, why the SEALs? Why was that so important to you?
Yeah. Well, it has to do with going back, funny enough, to that track and cross country team. We were a small track and cross country team, but our coach was very hard on us, like worked us out to the point where that was, almost our priority in life. And we were very good because of it. But on top of that, we were also very tight knit because we'd gone through some pretty tough times together. Tough times for a high school athlete, if you will. I mean, not anything tragic or traumatic, but just we'd gone through tough workouts together, and that kind of thing. And it brought us together very close. And that made me want to be part of something a tight-knit group, an elite group that was very good at what they wanted to do. So I was like, okay, I want to go into special operations. So I started looking at Green Berets, started looking at the Air Force PJs, started looking at now the Marine Raiders. And I'd also spent a lot of time at the ocean, or at least the Gulf. My family every summer would go take a vacation down to the beach in the Gulf of Mexico. And I would spend all day, every day during that vacation in the ocean. And I just loved it. And I was like, okay, you know what? Of all the special operations, what group is it that spends the most time in or around the water? And the SEALs bubbled to the surface. So yeah, I started looking at them pretty hard, and then I was like, you know what? Yep, that's the group that I want to go after. And then enlisted in the Navy at high school, and try to go from there into BUDS. Ended up getting picked up to go to the Naval Academy, and at the time I was like, well, I can't turn down the Naval Academy, because if I turn down the Naval Academy, or rather, if I go to BUDS and turn down the Naval Academy, I can never do the Naval Academy ever after that. But if I go to the Naval Academy, there's a chance I could still go to BUDS. So it was just a math equation for me, and ended up going that route to the SEAL teams, and never looked back, man. I loved every minute of it. And that's not true. I loved most of it.
I was going to say, you must love pain, right? Was there, did you get through all in one shot?
I didn't. I started with BUDS class 238, went into BUDS class 238 with several of my friends from the academy, and then got rolled day one. So you got, I don't know how familiar you are with the breakdown of BUDS, but you've got the pre-training, the PTRR. I don't even remember what it stands for, like pre-training, rest and recuperation or something like that. You do several weeks of that prior to classing up and actually starting your BUDS class. And that includes, some conditioning runs, learning how to do things on the O course, getting the very basics behind BUDS. So the basics behind basic underwater demolition. Anyway, you do that, and then you class up. Well, we classed up with 238. I want to say it was Halloween or around Halloween. It was the beginning of October of 2001. And the first day of BUDS is just hell. I mean, you do everything. You do a little bit of swimming. You do a little bit of running. You do a little bit of boats, a little bit of everything. And it's brutal. And I was on the obstacle course coming down this obstacle called the Slide for Life. And I actually ended up falling off of it, landed on my back, got up and was coughing up blood. And they're like, did you bite your tongue or something? And I was like, no, I don't know what happened. And they're like, well, why did you drop off? I was like, well, I was just exhausted. It turns out I had pneumonia, and it wasn't the fall that made me cough up blood. It was just the fact that I had pneumonia, and that had completely sapped all my energy. So I ended up getting rolled to the next class, 239, that started in January of 2002 and wrapped up in June of that same year.
And so being rolled, I mean, was this like, was there any part of you like, well, maybe this is not for me? Should I keep going?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I think most people who tell you, I never thought about quitting, or I never thought that this wasn't for me, I think most of them are lying. Because I certainly questioned it. I questioned it when I got rolled. I questioned it during Hell Week, when I was in a lot of pain, when I was tired, when I was hungry, when I was cold. But ultimately I had something in my mind that kept me going. And that was, I didn't come here to go to BUDS. Some guys, that's what they go run into them you swing a dead cat in the Navy, and you'll run into somebody who went to BUDS. But I didn't go there to go to Buds. I went there to become a Navy SEAL, and that was just a stepping stone. And I knew that if I could get through that stepping stone, then I would get to the larger goal. And I think that's a lesson in and of itself through life that, you know, I've always applied that as like, okay, well, what's the larger goal? And then break that down into stepping stones, and then just realize, hey, those stepping stones may suck, each one of them, but ultimately they lead to a much larger and much more important goal. And if you can break things down like that, you're going to be able to accomplish much greater things in life. So that's how I got through Buds, even looking back on it and thinking, man, there were times then I was like, I don't belong here. I mean, hell, there were times at the Naval Academy, I thought the same thing. I was like, there are much smarter people here than I am. But I broke down every day. I was like, okay, just get through today. And that's how I still get through life, through the days of diaper changing with the kids. I'm like, all right, if I could just get through tonight, put those kids to bed. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love them to death. But at the end of every day, when my wife and I put our little girl down, so our little boy goes down first, and then when we put my little boy down, it's both of us just look at each other and we're like, yeah, you know it, man. You know it. 4 sons. Holy cow. I can't even imagine.
I say things out loud to these children I didn't think I'd ever say to any other human being in my entire life. Like, please don't eat your cheese and crackers while you take a dump. I've actually said that. True story. Last few months. Yeah. And when it comes to getting through it and these stepping stones and the goals, what was the desired end state for you as you know, look, but if you're looking at Buds as like a stepping stone, what was the big goal for you?
I mean, it really comes back to that quote above the door at the chapel at the Naval Academy, the non sabias patriae, not for self, but for country. And I you know, the times that I was thinking about quitting were the times that I was personally uncomfortable. I was personally being selfish and like, you know what, I want to go quit, ring that bell, go get a warm cup of cocoa, go put some warm clothes on and crawl in my bed and just go to sleep. But then when I thought about, okay, what is it that I want to do? I want to serve my country. Again, going back to that elite team, doing the best thing that we can in the best way that we can. I knew that to serve my country in that best way was, at least for me, in the SEAL teams. There's certainly amazing other elements within the military, within the other branches of the military. But for me, the SEALs was what I wanted to do. And I knew that if I could just get out of my selfish mind and into the bigger picture, that I could get to that larger goal of serving my country as a SEAL.
Do you think that's why people are so keen to give up so soon? Because they're looking for the immediate comfort versus looking at the big picture?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. I think some of them even go in with a good big picture, but it's very easy to start losing perspective when you're in pain and when you're hungry and when you're cold and wet, tired. I mean, your mind starts playing some real bad tricks on you. So if you don't have that big picture solidified, it's easy to lose that big picture. I mean, what's the old saying? You can't see the forest for the trees, right? They're looking so closely at the pain that they're in that particular evolution. They can't see getting through that evolution, getting through Buds, and the immense pride that you feel when you pin that trident on, the immense pride that you feel when you lead an element into combat that you know is one of the best elements that's out there. I mean, let me tell you, any evolution that I did at Buds was a cakewalk compared to what I ended up doing in the SEAL teams. Did I lose you? There. All right. All right. So it was a cakewalk compared to some of the evolutions that I did in the SEAL teams. But I knew that I was surrounded by, again, some of the best men and women that this country has. And I cannot think back on an evolution and say, hey, you know what? It would have been worth quitting at that point, because nothing was worth it.
Man, that's awesome. And as you look at your life now, retired from the SEAL teams, and how you go about just life in general, like as far as being married, being a father, going about professions or anything that you're pursuing career wise or profession wise or whatever, what are some key lessons that you learned through that training that show up for you every day?
Yeah, totally, man. The what I call goal ladders, and I kind of referenced them here a second ago, but breaking every big thing down. We used to say at the Naval Academy, and it's become a saying that it certainly didn't start at the Naval Academy, but it's become a saying that I use quite regularly. But how do you eat an elephant? And I'm sure you've heard this before, but how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I mean, when you look at some goals, when you look at what it takes to accomplish those goals, when you just look at the big thing, you're like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to get that. But if you break it down into little steps, those stepping stones, those rungs on a ladder, that's one lesson that has definitely carried me forward to accomplishing most of my goals thus far. But then when the next thing is, when you do reach that goal, you have to say, okay, what next? What next? You can't just stop, right? I think if you stop, then, your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit atrophies. So you got to start looking at the next ridge line. And that's another thing that the SEALs taught me was, hey, sure, you made it through BUDS, but now you've got to make it through SEAL qualification training. Okay, well, great. You made it through SQT and you've got to try it. But guess what? New guy, you're a new guy at the team. You don't know jack. So you better learn pretty quickly and learn from those who have been there and done that. And then, 20 years later, when I start looking at the retirement door, the exit ramp, I'm a new guy again. I'm new to the civilian world, and that's the new horizon. That's the next ridgeline. What am I going to have to do to set myself up, set my family up for success in this new world that we're going to go like an adventure? My wife is former Navy as well. And the two of us have that in common, in that we set the goals, break them down into miniature digestible pieces, and then go forward. And then once we do accomplish that goal, we're like, what's next? What's next?
Man, this is so cool. What do you hope? And you said you have a son and a daughter, right?
I do. Right? Yeah. Okay. 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son.
Oh boy.
Yeah, dude. And when you say you had 4 sons, man, like I love my daughter. She's amazing, super passionate about, what you can be passionate about at 3 years old. And she's fearless, but man, my son, holy cow. He once he started walking, that's when I truly started to see the difference between girls, at least in my family, little girls and little boys. And he is a freaking wrecking ball, man. Like I love him to death, but man, he is a handful. So having 4 of those, I can't even imagine.
I can't either. I haven't slept in like 14 years, Jon.
I bet.
It's been a hell week of 14 years. This evolution has not ended.
Yeah. It's not going to end anytime soon.
No, it will not. It will not. So what do you hope to teach these young kiddos as they get older? I mean, dude, you have learned just some tremendous things that 99.9% of us will never get to experience and will never learn on your level. So if you could share some wisdom with us of like, hey, these are some things that I did get to learn and some things I did get to experience, and I'm going to pass these on.
Yeah. Wow. Let me think on that. I think there's several. One I've already talked about ad nauseum is the goal setting. And I think the kids will learn that along the way. It's going to be impossible for them not to learn that. The next piece is compassion for others and understanding what it is they're going through and then looking to help, but then also compassion for themselves. I think that's something that we don't give ourselves enough. I'm going to use the word slack, but that's a terrible word, but that's just for lack of a better term right now. We don't cut ourselves enough slack in that when we fail at something, we beat ourselves up. We're like, okay, we failed. When it's only a failure if you don't learn from it. And so I want to teach them self-compassion and understand that failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. So take a step back, understand you failed, take a breath. Okay, what can you learn from it, and move forward? And so, yeah, I think that's it. Goal setting, compassion for others, actually wanting to help them, not just understanding. So empathy and compassion, having empathy, but then wanting to take it one step further and actually help improve others' lives. And then having that self-compassion and understanding that failure is not failure if you learn from it.
Jon, I just want to love on you for a minute, man. I'll never forget, Mark Devine was the first Navy SEAL that I ever had on this show.
Yeah, he was my first guest on my podcast.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is great. And I'll never forget, like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is like the baddest dude on the planet. You know what I mean? And I don't say that, I say this very humbly. I've been able to interview quite a few of you guys at this point, and I don't feel that way anymore, because there's a side of you guys, and I don't mean to encapsulate all of you guys, but the men that I've had on this show is that the reason you do what you do is exactly what you illustrated in that quote. It's a very selfless thing, and you do it out of love.
Right.
You do it out of protection. You do it out of compassion. And there's no greater love for a friend than to lay down your life for that friend or your country. Right. And it's so reassuring to hear, like, everything that you've been through and who you are as a man. And you mention compassion, you mention empathy, you mention, even if I could take the theme from what you said, is giving yourself some grace. Right.
Yeah. That's a better word than what I use, for sure.
But the other thing too is, in our family, fail faster. In fact, I just had these frames custom made for my two boys. I took them on a ride. Actually, I took my kids through like a big time weekend rite of passage, my two oldest boys, where we hiked up. They were with me on those 14ers, and we stopped and I read them the 7 pillars of transitioning from boyhood to manhood. And I gave them this custom made canvas that we had done, and it had a Spartan on it who was wounded, had a sword and a shield. And basically the message on that was, you either win or you learn. You don't fail. You win or you learn. And in fact, if you can figure out a way to fail faster and learn faster, that's going to put you ahead. Yep. And most parents, most people are terrified of failure. I'll give you one quick example. My 12-year-old, he's always been a good student, always A's and B's. He's one of those guys like, did you study for this test? No, not really. You know what I mean? It's like, I was like, I used to hate kids like you growing up. Yeah. But he got his first F in ELA, which is English Language Arts, I think they call it now. And he didn't turn in a big assignment, and I knew he got an F, first F ever. Yep. And there's that part of you as a parent that you're just like, you know what? Right? The hammer's coming down. And I looked at him. He got, I think, 3 A's, 2 B's, a C, and an F. And he came home, and I'm like, hey, man. I was like, I thought you told me you got your grades up in ELA. And he's like, I did. I pulled it up. It was an F because I didn't turn that assignment. I got it up to a C. I was like, are you sure about that? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. I was like, your report card came today. It's his first F. He's in 7th grade. And I was like, you have an F for the quarter. And he's like, what? And I was like, you have an F. Do you know why? And I knew why. So I had a parent teacher conference with his teacher. And he's like, I don't know why. And the conversation I had with his teacher, a parent teacher conference, was, he told me, he was like, look, he didn't turn this big assignment in. Like, biggest assignment that he didn't turn it in, gets an F. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, here's what I want him to do. Here's what I'm going to tell him to do. I'm going to tell him he needs to come and talk to you and figure this out. And I'm not going to tell him that I know. And he's like, okay, cool. He looked at me, he goes, more parents need to be like that. Seriously, he's like, most parents come in here and fight and try to defend and all this. He's like,
yeah.
I was like, no, this is on him. He needs to figure this out.
That's a huge learning point, man.
It is. And he crumbled and he was so upset. And I was like, listen, you're not in trouble. I'm not going to ground you. I'm not going to punish you. What are we learning from this right now? He's like, I don't know. I was like, well, do you not understand why you got an F? He's like, no, I don't understand why. I was like, well, I think that's the learning moment. You need to go figure out why.
Yeah.
So what are you going to go do? He's like, I'm going to go talk to my teacher. I was like, okay, great. What are you going to say? And he thought about it and we kind of went through some things. Anyway, he learned basically how to recalibrate. But as he did this though, he crumbled. He hardly ever cries. And he was a freaking sobbing mess because he's so hard on himself. And I looked at him, I'm like, look, I know this is important to you. And I know this was a miss and you got an F and you're paying for it. I was like, and there's no punishment that I can dish out that you're being more hard on yourself than I ever could be. But this is a learning moment, man. This is on you. You're a young man and you need to take care of this. He's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't think we need to be so afraid of failure. In fact, I think when failure presents itself, because it always will, we have such a tremendous opportunity to guide them into a learning moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And good on you for taking it as that, an opportunity for you as a father to guide them to that learning moment. That's huge. Good on you.
What I didn't mention is I beat him after that. So,
rightly so.
That's right. Take that. All right, man. Well, hey, as we wrap up here, I want to make sure that the audience can find everything that you're doing, everything that you're working on, things that you're excited about. So where can men find you, your resources, and what you have going on?
Yeah, man. So one thing we didn't talk too much about, and I'm glad I liked, this was refreshing, is I teach mindfulness and meditation now, which is kind of different from what most SEALs do when they get out. But that's what I do. I do it with a nonprofit called Veterans Path. So you can find me on Instagram as mindful_frogman, or on LinkedIn, just as Jon Macaskill, JON MACASKILL. And then the nonprofit that I work with, Veterans Path, we're on all the different social media platforms. So if you are a transitioning service member or a veteran and you're looking for resources, reach out to me because I'd be happy to point you in the right direction, whether it's with my nonprofit or whether it's with some other foundation that can help you out. So that's how to find me.
Man, that's awesome. Well, hey, gentlemen, not to worry. We're going to have all of Jon's links in the show notes. I don't even have to look at what the links are going to be because we already know this is episode 300. So if you go to gooddadproject.com/300, 300.
Hey, I'm honored that I'm 300 and there's a Spartan sign behind you. And I'm like, heck yeah, I love everything about it.
That's right, man. That's right. This is like, it's like two worlds coming together, man. It's like, it's a good show. But yeah, guys, don't even worry about it. gooddadproject.com/300. We'll have everything in there for you. Jon, thank you so much for your service. And thank you for blessing us with an hour of your time today to share some amazing gems about how we can go about life.
Absolutely, man. It was my pleasure. And thanks for having me on.
Hey, you bet, man.